There's something uniquely terrifying about the sound of rain at night, the way it drowns out distant noises, masking what lurks beyond the veil of darkness. You think you're alone, until you realize something has been watching you the entire time. These are real horror stories that happen to real people, stories of eerie figures in the woods, strangers with unsettling intentions, and encounters that could have ended much, much worse. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and listen carefully, because sometimes the scariest things aren't ghosts or monsters, but the people hiding in the dark, a weekend escape, or so we thought. It was supposed to be a fun, relaxing weekend. Ryan, Jamie, and I had planned this trip for weeks, just a weekend deep in the woods, far from assignments, stress, and the constant noise of city life. Jamie, being the most experienced camper, had picked the spot, a secluded clearing by the river, miles away from any hiking trails or known campsites. "Nobody goes out there," he had said. "It's completely untouched. If only we had known why." The drive to the mountains took most of the morning. As the paved roads turned into winding dirt paths, the world around us grew emptier. No houses, no towns, just endless trees pressing in from both sides. By the time we reached the entrance to the forest, I already felt uneasy. It was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that makes your skin crawl, like the whole world is holding its breath. I shook off the feeling. Maybe I was just overthinking things. We grabbed our gear and stepped into the woods. The first signs. The hike to our site was brutal. Jamie had told us it was a short walk, but after 2 hours of pushing through thick brush, ducking under branches, and slipping on damp leaves, we started to doubt him. "Almost there," he kept saying. I glanced over my shoulder. The deeper we went, the darker it got. Even though it was only afternoon, the dense canopy blocked out the sun, casting everything in an eerie greenish gloom. The only sounds were our footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Then, somewhere behind us, a branch snapped. I stopped, turned around. Nothing. Just trees, unmoving and silent. "You good?" Ryan asked. I forced a laugh. "Yeah. Thought I heard something." Jamie smirked. "City boy instincts. Relax, man. There's nobody out here but us." I nodded, but a strange feeling settled in my chest, the kind you get when you know you're being watched. I ignored it. Big mistake. The clearing by the river. 3 hours in, we finally arrived. The clearing was just like Jamie had described, a wide open space with soft grass, a gentle slope leading down to the river, and towering trees on all sides. The air was crisp, the sound of running water soothing. It was perfect. We set up camp in the middle of the field. The trees surrounding us felt like walls, pressing in, trapping us. The only way out was the narrow trail we had come from. By sunset, we had a fire going, the smell of burning wood mixing with the cool night air. We drank, laughed, and let our guard down. Then, as I stared into the flickering flames, I saw them, the figures in the trees. It started as a flicker in the corner of my eye, a shape standing just beyond the tree line. I turned my head sharply, but it was gone. I shook it off, just a trick of the light, but then I saw it again, a little farther to the left this time, a dark silhouette standing perfectly still between the trees, watching us. The hair on my arms stood up. Guys? I tried to keep my voice calm, but my pulse had already picked up. Jamie and Ryan followed my gaze. There was nothing there. Jamie frowned. "What?" "I swear, I just saw someone." Ryan snorted. "Dude, it's the woods, shadows, branches. Your brain's just making stuff up." Maybe he was right, but the feeling in my gut told me otherwise. Then Jamie's expression changed. His face tightened, eyes narrowing. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, almost too quietly, he muttered, "I thought I saw it too." A chill ran through me. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. He opened his mouth to make another joke, but he didn't, because at that moment, we all heard it. Footsteps in the darkness. A single crunch of leaves, then another, slow, deliberate, circling us. Jamie reached for his flashlight, clicked it on, swung the beam toward the trees. Nothing, just darkness. The night felt heavier now, the fire suddenly too small, the clearing too exposed. "Maybe an animal?" Ryan whispered, but he didn't sound convinced. I swallowed. My throat was dry. Yeah, maybe. But deep down, I knew the truth. Animals don't stand still and watch you. Animals don't move like that. We tried to ignore it. We tried to keep the conversation going, to pretend everything was fine. But the feeling never went away. And worse, it got stronger. The longest night. We decided to call it a night. Jamie and Ryan crawled into their tents, but I wasn't tired. Not after what I had seen. I sat by the fire, staring into the darkness, listening. Every so often, I heard it. The soft shuffle of footsteps just beyond the trees, moving when I wasn't looking, stopping the moment I turned my head. I gripped my flashlight tighter. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't crazy. Something was out there. And then, the fire flickered. For a split second, the shadows around the clearing stretched and twisted. And I saw them. At least 6 figures standing just outside the light. Watching. Waiting. My breath caught in my throat. I reached for the machete Jamie had left by the fire. My fingers barely brushed the handle when they moved, not toward me, around me, circling. The fire dimmed again. I bolted for my tent, zipped it shut, and sat there, heart pounding. I listened. I waited. And then, just when I thought maybe, just maybe, I had imagined it all. The footsteps returned, right outside my tent, and this time, they stopped, inches away. The only thing separating us was the thin nylon fabric, and then, a hand pressed against the tent wall, fingers splaying out, slowly dragging down. The presence outside my tent. The fabric of my tent shifted, not from the wind, not from an animal brushing past. It was deliberate. A hand, pressing firmly against the nylon wall, fingers splayed out, tracing, feeling. They knew I was inside. My body refused to move. My breath was shallow, barely there. The hand dragged downward, slow, methodical, like they were savoring the moment. I gripped the small camping knife in my sleeping bag, my sweaty fingers barely able to hold it steady. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I wanted to scream for Jamie or Ryan, but what if they were already gone? What if I was the only one left? I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for something, anything. Then, silence. The presence outside my tent was gone. I strained my ears. No footsteps, no rustling. Just the river, whispering softly in the distance. I lay awake for hours, too terrified to move. I must have drifted off at some point because the next thing I knew, I woke up to screaming. The chase begins. Jamie's voice, panicked, desperate. "Get up, now, run!" I tore out of my sleeping bag, my entire body jolted awake by pure adrenaline. The sun had barely risen. Gray light stretched through the misty clearing, but I didn't have time to process anything. Jamie was already outside his tent, frantically shoving things into his backpack. Ryan burst out of his own tent, wild-eyed, breathless. "What the hell is going on?" I yelled, but Jamie grabbed my arm and yanked me forward. "They were in the camp last night." His voice was shaking. "They were standing over our tents." My stomach dropped. "Who?" Jamie just shook his head, his face pale. "I don't know, but they're still out there." Ryan spun around toward the tree line. His face fell. "Oh my God." I followed his gaze. and froze. They were there, standing at the edge of the clearing, not hiding, not slipping between the trees, just standing, watching, closer than before. I counted at least 7 figures, motionless, faceless, draped in tattered clothing that blended with the trees. "Run!" Jamie shouted. We grabbed whatever we could and sprinted for the trail, the nightmare trail. We ran, hard, branches tore at my arms, my legs screamed with exhaustion, but I didn't stop. Behind us, I heard them. Footsteps, not running, not chasing, following, steady, unhurried, like they knew exactly where we were going. Jamie was leading us, taking turns so fast I nearly tripped multiple times. "I don't remember this path," Ryan gasped. Jamie didn't answer. We kept going, lungs burning, the forest closing in around us. Then, just ahead, the trail split in two. Jamie skidded to a stop. "Left or right?" I shouted. He hesitated. I risked a glance back. They were still there, closer, just at the edge of the mist. Ryan grabbed my sleeve. "Left." We bolted left, plunging deeper into the woods. The trail was even narrower now, barely visible beneath the underbrush, twisting, uneven. Then, Ryan screamed. I turned just in time to see him fall, disappearing from sight. "Ryan!" Jamie and I skidded to a stop, our feet nearly slipping off the hidden drop-off. Below us, Ryan was sprawled in a ditch, groaning in pain. The trail had ended in a sharp slope, nearly invisible through the thick brush. I'm okay," Ryan gasped. Then, his face twisted in horror. "Behind you!" Jamie and I whipped around, and we saw them, right at the edge of the trail, no longer standing still, moving, coming toward us, slow, steady, like they had all the time in the world. I grabbed Jamie's arm. "Jump!" We leaped into the ditch, crashing through leaves and dirt. My ankle twisted painfully, but I didn't stop. Ryan was already scrambling up, his face pale with terror. "Go!" Jamie shouted. We pushed forward deeper into the forest, and that's when we heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. A whistle, low, hollow, echoing through the trees, coming from every direction. Jamie grabbed my arm. "They're not just following us." His voice was barely above a whisper. "They're hurting us." The cabin in the woods. We didn't stop running until we saw it, a cabin hidden deep within the forest, covered in vines and decay. It looked abandoned, but right now, it was our only hope. We didn't think, didn't hesitate. We rushed inside, slamming the door behind us. Darkness swallowed us whole. The air was damp, stale. The only light came from the cracks in the boarded-up windows. Jamie locked the door. Ryan collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. Silence. I pressed my ear against the wood. No footsteps, no rustling, nothing. Had we lost them? I turned to Jamie. His face was tight, his breathing ragged. "Do you think?" A creak sounded from the floorboards above us. All three of us froze. Ryan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The ceiling creaked again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. We weren't alone. The final realization. I swallowed hard, gripping my knife. Jamie motioned for us to stay quiet. We barely breathed. Then, the footsteps stopped, right above us, directly overhead. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a whisper, right above us. So soft, I almost thought I imagined it. But I didn't, because Ryan heard it too. His face twisted in pure terror. Jamie's hand tightened around the machete. Then, something slammed against the ceiling. Once, twice, then silence. The air grew impossibly heavy. Then, a knock on the door. We turned, staring at the rotting wood. A long, drawn-out knock, and then a voice. Not loud, not angry, just soft, almost amused. "You shouldn't be here." The door creaked, the handle twisted, and then If this story sent chills down your spine, smash that like button and share this with your friends. Let them know. The woods are never truly empty. The storm had been raging for hours. Heavy raindrops hammered against the windows like desperate fingers trying to claw their way inside. The wind howled through the trees, making the house creak and groan under the pressure. I was home alone that night. I had been alone plenty of times before. My dad worked late shifts, and my mom, being a nurse, had unpredictable hours. It never bothered me. In fact, I liked the solitude. But that night felt different. There was something off about the way the rain sounded, the way it drowned out every other noise, muting the world beyond the windows. Like something could be out there, and I wouldn't even hear it. I shook the thought away and turned back to my game. I was deep into a PS3 campaign, my headphones on, my focus locked in, until it happened. A knock at the front door. I froze. We never got visitors this late. The only people who ever came to our house were my parents, the mailman, and the occasional neighbor, but never at night. For a moment, I thought about ignoring it. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe I had imagined it. But then, the knocking came again, and again, persistent, forceful. I hesitated, my heart pounding now. Something felt wrong. Slowly, I slid my headphones off, setting my controller down with shaky fingers. The rain slammed against the house in deafening waves, making it impossible to hear anything beyond the door. Who would be out there in this weather? I crept toward the peephole, every instinct in my body screaming at me not to. But I had to look. I had to know. I pressed my eye to the peephole and felt my stomach drop. A police officer was standing on my porch. The officer stood completely still on the porch. The dim porch light flickered, barely illuminating him through the heavy rain. His uniform was soaked, the fabric clinging to his frame, but something about him felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. Then I realized, where was his patrol car? I squinted, scanning the street beyond the rain-blurred glass. Nothing. No flashing lights. No vehicle parked along the curb. Just the dark, wet pavement stretching endlessly in both directions. A deep, sinking feeling settled in my chest. Something wasn't right. Then, as if he knew I was watching, he knocked again, louder, more forceful. "Sir, I need to come inside." I flinched. His voice was flat, emotionless. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Every instinct in my body screamed at me, "Don't open the door." The silence between us stretched. The only sound was the relentless drumming of the rain against the house. The dim porch light flickered again, casting eerie shadows across the officer's face. Something about the way he stood there, waiting, made my skin crawl. I forced myself to speak, my voice hoarse. What do you need, officer?" A pause. Then, "I just need to check something. It'll only take a minute." His tone didn't change. Flat, distant, like he was repeating a script. I swallowed hard. "Check what?" Another pause. Then, he smiled. And that's when I saw his teeth, yellowed, rotting, unnatural. A shiver tore through me. Cops don't look like that. Something was very, very wrong. I took a step back. He saw it. His smile widened. Then, he grabbed the door handle and twisted. The handle rattled, hard. The entire door shook in its frame. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. "Sir, my parents aren't home," I blurted out, hoping it would make him leave. He didn't. His grip on the handle tightened. Then, in a voice too calm for someone trying to enter a house, he said, "I know." A cold wave of terror crashed over me. He knew. I took another step back, my legs trembling. My mind was screaming at me to run, to call someone, anyone. Then, bang. The door shook violently. Bang, bang. He wasn't knocking anymore. He was trying to break in. The door shuddered under the force of his blows. The wood groaned, the hinges rattling. I stumbled back toward the kitchen, my hands shaking as I reached for the phone. 911. Call 911. My fingers trembled as I dialed. The ringing felt like it lasted forever. Outside, bang, bang, bang. Open the door, no longer calm, no longer patient. His voice was wrong now, angrier, more distorted, like he wasn't even trying to sound human anymore. Then, the operator picked up. 911, what's your emergency? I gasped, my voice barely working. Someone's trying to break into my house. The pounding stopped. Silence. Then, a single drawn-out tap on the door, like a warning. Then, footsteps, slow, leaving the porch. The officer was walking away, but somehow, I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The silence was worse than the pounding. I clutched the phone tighter, my breathing ragged. Sir, stay on the line. Officers are on their way. The dispatcher's voice was steady, but it did nothing to calm me, because I could still feel him, somewhere, waiting. I crept toward the front window, my heart slamming against my ribs. The porch was empty, but that didn't make sense. I hadn't heard a car. I hadn't heard him leave. Where did he go? Then, a shadow moved across the yard, not fast, slow, deliberate. He was still here, circling the house, looking for another way in. I ducked away from the window, my pulse hammering. He's still outside, I whispered into the phone. The dispatcher's voice remained calm. Stay hidden. Officers are minutes away. Minutes. I wasn't sure I had that long, because at that moment, I heard the back door creak open. The back door. It had been locked. I was sure of it. But now, it was open. A faint creaking sound echoed through the house. I felt the blood drain from my face. He's inside, I whispered into the phone. The dispatcher's voice sharpened. Stay quiet. Lock yourself in a room if you can. I couldn't move. Footsteps, software almost careful. He was in the kitchen now. I swallowed hard, backing toward the stairs. The phone was slippery in my sweaty grip. The dispatcher's voice was distant now, drowned out by the thunderous pounding of my own heartbeat. Step, step, the sound of shoes against tile. He was moving, he was searching, and I was running out of time. What would you have done in this situation? Drop a comment below. Would you have opened the door? The night shift at a gas station is lonely. The hum of the neon lights, the occasional buzz of a flickering sign, the distant sound of cars speeding down the highway, it all blends together into a strange kind of quiet. Most nights are boring. Just me, the security cameras, and a few late-night travelers stopping for gas and cigarettes. But some nights stick with you. This was one of those nights. It was just after 1 a.m. when I first noticed the car. A dark sedan, old but well-maintained, pulled into the lot and parked near the edge of the lights. But the driver never got out. At first I didn't think much of it. Maybe they were just tired, taking a break before continuing their drive. But then 5 minutes passed. Then 10. They didn't move. The headlights were off. The engine was silent. Yet, I could feel it. Whoever was inside was watching me. I tried to ignore it. People did weird things at night. Maybe they were just looking at their phone or arguing with someone on a call, but something about it felt off. I leaned over the counter, trying to get a better look through the window. The reflection made it impossible to see inside, just the outline of the car, the faint shape of a figure in the driver's seat. They weren't moving. They weren't doing anything, just sitting there, waiting. A shiver crawled up my spine. I turned away, forcing myself to focus on the register. It's nothing. Don't overthink it. I checked the clock. 1:15 a.m. 15 minutes. The car was still there, still watching. I forced myself to look away from the window. Maybe if I ignored them, they'd just leave. I busied myself by wiping down the counter, restocking the gum and candy racks, anything to shake the uneasy feeling crawling under my skin. 1:20 a.m. I risked another glance outside. The car was still there, still parked in the same spot, still watching. I swallowed hard. I wasn't scared. Not yet. Just on edge. Then, the gas station door chimed. I jerked my head up, and my stomach dropped. The man was inside. I never heard the door open, never heard footsteps, but suddenly, he was just there, standing inside the store, staring directly at me. My breath caught in my throat. He wasn't wet from the rain. His dark hoodie and jeans were completely dry, as if he hadn't been outside at all. But that didn't make sense. I had just seen him in the car. Right? His eyes flicked away when I noticed him, and he started walking the aisles pretending to browse. But something was wrong. His movements were too slow, too deliberate, like he was just waiting. Waiting for what? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to act normal. "Can I help you, sir?" No response. He just kept walking, dragging his fingers along the shelves, like he wasn't even looking at the items, like he was listening, waiting for something. And then he turned and smiled. That smile. It wasn't normal. It was too wide, too forced, like he had just remembered he was supposed to look friendly. But his eyes didn't match the smile. They stayed cold, unblinking. I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady my breathing. "Sir?" He didn't answer, just kept smiling. Then, suddenly, he turned and walked straight for the door, but instead of leaving, he ran. He bolted outside and disappeared into the night. My stomach twisted. What the hell just happened? I rushed to the window, scanning the lot. The car was still there, but now, the driver's seat was empty. And that's when the realization hit me. He had never been in the car. He had been inside the gas station the whole time. My entire body went cold. If he hadn't been in the car, then where had he come from? I whipped around, scanning the store. The aisles were empty. The storage room door was slightly ajar, swaying from the motion sensor's faint breeze. Number A, horrible thought sank into my chest like a stone. I lunged for the security monitor. The footage flickered to life, grainy, black and white, displaying multiple angles of the gas station. I rewound the tape, watched as the car pulled in, watched as the man appeared inside the store without ever using the front door. I fast-forwarded, watched myself looking at the car, watched the moment I turned my back, and then I saw it, a shadow slipping out from the storage room. He had been inside for 15 minutes, just standing there, watching me, waiting. My hands were shaking. 15 minutes. He had been in the storage room for 15 whole minutes, just standing there, just watching me. I scrubbed a hand over my face, my stomach twisting. How had I not noticed? The storage room door was always supposed to be locked. Had I left it open? Or had he somehow gotten in on his own? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to rewind the footage even further. 12:45 a.m. The storage room was empty. 12:50 a.m. Still empty. 12:52 a.m. A flicker. I leaned closer, my breath catching. The camera glitched for half a second, and when it came back, he was just there, standing in the middle of the storage room, motionless. No door had opened. No one had walked inside. He had just appeared. My breath hitched. Number, that wasn't possible. I rewound the footage again, frame by frame. 1 second, the storage room was empty. The next, he was there, dead center, motionless, facing the door, like he had been waiting, like he knew I was alone. A cold sweat broke out on my skin. I suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable. I tore my eyes from the screen and glanced toward the back of the store. The storage room door was still slightly open, a sliver of blackness beyond it. Silent. Still. I wasn't alone in here. I never had been. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The storage room door was still open. Not much. Just enough. A sliver of darkness beyond it, stretching into the unknown. I stared at the gap, my skin crawling with the overwhelming feeling that if I so much as blinked, something would move, something would reach out. I forced myself to take a step back, then another. My hand fumbled for the baseball bat under the counter, my fingers curling around the cold metal. I didn't want to go back there, didn't want to check, but I had to. I had to make sure he was really gone. I gritted my teeth, gripping the bat tighter, and then the door creaked open wider. The door creaked wider. I froze, didn't move, didn't breathe. The gap was larger now, just enough to see a portion of the storage room beyond. Dark shelves, stacks of boxes, the old mop leaning against the wall. But no movement, no sound, no sign of him. But I could feel something, a presence, a weight in the air, like the room itself was holding its breath. I swallowed hard, gripped the bat tighter, and then a shadow shifted inside. For more real horror stories, subscribe to Nightmare Narratives and turn on notifications, because the next terrifying story might be yours.